Harbor Committee. I see Richard just joining, which is great. Thank you all for coming. And I have the Zoom going, and I'll watch, and if anybody joins in via Zoom, I'll let them in that way and flip this thing around so we can all see them.
So there's nobody in yet?
There's nobody in yet. Nope, not currently. As with all these meetings, I like to just remind everybody this is a public meeting. Minutes are being taken. Janice is recording via various means. If you do have questions and comments, please direct them through the chair, which at the moment is myself, and we'll try to keep things moving and orderly that way. I think that's pretty much it from a procedures standpoint. I was notified that Bob Perkins and Margie Gross would not be able to attend today. So I think this is our group, unless Sandy Welty is able to make it. Okay, I think that's about all. We have a pretty busy agenda, so I'm going to kind of keep moving fairly quickly today. If there are no questions on that, are there any public input on non-agenda items? You have something, Jeremy? No.
I have a question regarding our recommendations to the select board for Steamboat Landing.
Yes.
What is the status?
The status of that is, I must apologize. So Bruce and I drafted the document, just taking all the recommendations that were approved at the last meeting and putting them into a more of a narrative form, but not changing any of the substance. And I submitted that yesterday to the select board, and I apologize. I did not send any to this committee. I'm sending you so many emails. I didn't send. That was the one thing I didn't send. So I will send that as soon as it's done. As soon as I get out of here, I will send that to you guys. I apologize for that. I think it came out very well. It was quite a lot of back and forth between Bruce and I, including a meeting, and I think I got one note back from Audra thanking me for it, so I hope it will be well received. What else? Yes, sir.
Do we have alternate to designate?
Oh, well, I guess that since we only have one alternate, Tom, I'll nominate Tom Griffin as the voting member today. That's a motion. Does anybody, do we need to approve that? Second. All those in favor? Boom, boom, 4-0, excuse me, 4-0. Okay, so we don't have any other public input on non-agenda items. So then I guess we'll move right to the meeting minutes from last time. I did print out, just so you guys know, a copy of the agenda if anybody needs it, since I know I sent everything kind of late this time around. And the minutes. Did anybody get a chance to look at the minutes prior to this meeting? Let's be honest, people. You printed them up. I appreciate Bruce's work on these. I think this is just the right level that we want. And does anybody have any comments, changes, amendments? And if not, I would entertain a motion. Don't all jump in at once. Mark can't do it because he wasn't here.
I wasn't here.
Can I do it?
You can do it, yeah.
My motion to approve as is.
All righty, we have a motion, a second. Tom seconds that one. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? 4-0, thank you. All right, now the majority of this meeting is going to be dedicated to the new pier that has been proposed on Bayview Street. We are joined this morning by Will Gartley. I'm sorry.
Bill Lane.
Bill, right. I knew your first name. I'm blanking the last one. From Gartley and Dorsey.
Bill Lane.
Bill Lane. Hopefully you guys did get a chance to review the application packet that Will had submitted, which I have on here since it was so long. My printer didn't like it.
is college property.
But I did wonder, so the other, the main thing is that we do have this checklist criteria form that Jeremy sent around. This went around real late last night.
Yeah,
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Did everybody, because I printed out copies of this morning, if anybody doesn't have one. You want one there? Can you send that down, please? Thank you.
The same thing as you used last time.
Will Gartley?
Will Guy, hang on.
Sorry, Jeremy?
For the most part, it's the same thing you used last time when you did the last beer.
And I see Will's brought a couple of large drawings, plans of the project, which is great. See those?
If anybody would like.
I'd like to see, I mean, I could share with these guys, it's fine. Is that two copies of the same one?
No. Take that down there if you want.
There's nothing there.
You want to introduce this, or will somebody want to just sort of introduce the project before we start down our list?
Yeah, I'm happy to Jeremy.
Jeremy Martin, Planning and Development Director for the town. Similar to the last one you reviewed on Harbor Road, there's a proposed pier for the Shermans at 260 Bayview. I've reviewed it for compliance with the shoreline zoning ordinance and found the application complete. Forward it to you folks, and then you folks review it and provide some recommendations or comments to the select board. It also goes to the planning board. We had a hearing scheduled for tomorrow evening on this. We're going to continue that to another date after this goes through this process. And we're going to keep, there's two tracks on these. There's the harbor ordinance and then there's the zoning ordinance. And so they kind of play together, but they kind of don't play together. So an applicant, they have submitted to the planning board already, and planning board will review it in the near future, as will the select board once they get your recommendations.
Does the planning board, that application, is that a site plan review application?
That is a site plan review application. Their ordinance has a list of things that require site plan approval by the planning board, and piers are one of those. So it is separate from the ordinance, the harbor ordinance. That's a zoning ordinance that regulates this as well.
Cool.
So, Jeremy, can you
Yes.
help me clarify something here? In section D, it talks about the review process.
Yeah.
It goes to the harbor committee, and then the select board, and then the planning board, and then back to the select board?
That's yeah. The ordinance is not clear at all. And I know the select board has some concerns with the clarity of the ordinance and the process. But nothing in that ordinance there, and Bill Kelly, the town attorney's reviewed it. Will has done, these for the last 20 years. There is, the process that has generally been used is it goes to the harbor committee, goes to the planning board, and then goes to the select board. If you read the harbor ordinance, it says that the select board issues the permit. Under the harbor ordinance, they issue a permit. It's challenging to think that the planning board would review it after the select board review. The planning board decides they want some conditions added, and it already has gone to the select board, then it would have to go back to the select board. Kind of an odd thing. But again, the site, and just trying to clarify if it does, I don't know if it really does, but the zoning ordinance is a separate process, right? They're not tied together in the zoning ordinance. It doesn't say, go look at the harbor ordinance or which one goes first. There's a site plan review process, and those requirements and the submittals and the timing and when a hearing is scheduled, that's in the zoning ordinance for a site plan review of a pier. So we can't kind of ignore that while this other piece plays out. We kind of have to review them. They submitted, we got to review it. So I'm going to actually work with the town attorney today to try to come up with some clarity on it. He's reviewed it. He's pretty confident and been consistent on this, that the select board is the ultimate arbiter on these. Yeah.
Because in reading through it, my concept is that the select board looks at it first and they say, yes, this is.
You mean the harbor committee?
Or, no, the select board.
Okay.
They look at it and say, yep, sure, this looks like a project that meets the criteria, but they don't actually make a decision on it. They say, we can move this forward to the harbor committee and the planning board. And then the select board comes back and reviews the decisions from the harbor committee and the planning board.
I don't, that doesn't make sense how I read the ordinance, nor does, I don't think Will thinks that, or I don't want to put words in Will's mouth, but the town attorney either. The way it is it gets submitted to our office, we have X number of days to forward it off to the harbor committee. And then the harbor committee reviews it, and then it says they provide recommendations to the select board. It doesn't really speak to the planning board piece.
Well, that's where I'm a little, if I can jump in.
Go ahead.
That's where I'm a little confused with this, or with the, not the question, but the question of the question, I guess, because in section 6, procedure for permit, it seems quite clear. It says, the code enforcement officer reviews it for compliance, et cetera, forwards it to the harbor committee. Then the review of the harbor committee shall be in writing and specifically address the standards, yada, 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 which we have. Upon receipt of the review and comments of the harbor committee, the select board, after a public hearing, shall either approve with conditions, or disapprove the proposed project. If disapproved, it shall be in writing, et cetera. If approved, the approval shall be in writing and shall not be effective until approval by the planning board under site plan review. So what I'm always been a little bit confused by is, why does that go back to the select board? It's the next section I'm seeing this. Yeah, the application. That is confusing. Okay.
Nothing
Well, that's
there,
not really-
nothing there says that the planning board reviews it before the select board or after the select board. It doesn't say that. I mean, one could interpret that to mean that, but it doesn't say that. I think it's important to remember there are two ordinances that regulate a process. The zoning ordinance and the harbor ordinance. Again, reviewing this with the town attorney, the select board is the final arbiter. They're the ones who actually issue a pier permit. And that's what it says in there. So it's different than the permit that the code office issues when we issue a building permit. That's a building permit to construct it. It's not the permit approval permit that the select board grants. They're the final arbiter on whether or not a permit's issued. I think it's a little.
So with that said, I mean, it would make sense that the select board is the final review.
Correct. That's.
So, which is the way we're moving, so.
So, I mean, for the purposes of this meeting, we know that we need to review it.
I think you should focus.
I think it's clear you're first.
We're first in line,
You're
so
first.
we'll do our job.
Stay on
and
that
then-
focus and review it, and we'll
Yep.
shepherd it through the process that it needs to go through. And again, I know the select board, they don't necessarily agree on the process that's played out currently, or has been for the last couple of decades. But certainly with the moratorium that they approved last night to go to voters for, piers in the coastal and outer harbor, they have some, significant interest in this issue. So I think that's what's generated this, which comes first. I think the ordinance is pretty clear, as clear as it is in the words that we have in front of us. Could it be clearer? Yes.
I didn't mean to bog down the meeting, I just, we can move forward.
I appreciate it.
Well, let's, then, I think the next step is probably to, Will, do you want to introduce the project at all? I think you submitted a letter, and I had a couple questions on that, but just why don't you give us the overview?
Sure. So this proposal is for Betsy Sherman at 260 Bayview Street. And I think that a peer proposal came before you for this same property once before. In fact, it was approved by the DEP and the Army Corps. And this design is just slightly revised.
I will add maybe just to, I don't remember it being approved, it wasn't approved when I was here, but it did come, they have been working on this, like Will said, it had its Army Corps and DEP permits for a while. They were working on this prior to COVID hitting. They were in line to get to you folks 2+ years ago, and some things just fell apart.
But just to be clear on that, that was one of my questions. I looked through the notes and the minutes and all that. It never came to us. We didn't actually
That was
get
the
to.
planning board, which is weird that they did it that way. We weren't involved at that time, so
You weren't?
I'm
Okay.
trying to, I don't know
It did go to
exactly
the
the
planning
process.
board since I've been here.
Okay.
So I think they originally had permit, I forget the name of the outfit out of Lincolnville.
Private consultants.
Permit consultants working on this, and then it kind of just died on submittal end. They submitted some stuff and we had some issues with it, and then it kind of went away. It never got forwarded to the planning board or the harbor committee.
Okay.
So this is the first time this committee really reviewed it, but that's fine.
And so the length of the pier is 125 feet beyond the harbor line or mean high water. And this pier is in the coastal harbor, opposed to the last one that we were here for, which was in the outer harbor.
135.
What's that?
135.
It's 135 from the last support, but for your ordinance, it's 125. The max length is measured from the mean high water line or the wharf line. So I have both dimensions on there. The 135 takes you to the center of the last crib on land, but the 125 is dimensioned from the harbor line. And then we have the max length of 50 feet beyond the end of the pier to the float. And in the outer harbor, floats are allowed to be a little bigger than they are. I mean, in the coastal harbor, they're allowed to be a little larger than in the outer harbor. The other difference is that it's allowed to be higher than in the outer harbor. So the elevation of the pier is a little higher than it could be if it was in the outer harbor. The other thing that we've done on this project is that whole height issue is a little bit of a balancing act because you've got limits on the length of ramp and float. The higher the pier is, the steeper it is at low tide. So what we've done on this project is slope the actual structure. It's not a very steep slope, but the very outer end of it is, what's the elevation? It's at 18 feet. And then where the stairs hit at the shore side, it's elevation 20. So there's about a 2-foot drop over that 135 feet, which is,
So if you put a basketball there,
it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Slowly, though.
Yeah.
Can I interject? We're just, Sophie Romana, our select board liaison, is joining us. Has joined us.
And then the other thing is we've proposed having the movable lifting gallows at the end, similar to the last pier that we had for ease of pulling the gangway up onto the pier deck. So we've got 3 granite cribs. There's quite an elevation change at the shore. It's quite a rugged section of shoreline there. It's a lot of ledge, and then it starts to drop off relatively quickly. And so we've got a pretty good sized set of stairs that gets us up to an existing path that kind of goes along the shoreline.
So you got 3 granite piers or 4?
Well, 4 total. One of them is above the harbor line.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a site plan that shows this relative to
The rest of the property?
the rest of the harbor?
Oh, the rest of the harbor.
Where it is actually located from Curtis Island in that
Yeah,
area?
for example.
Yeah, it's around the corner. It's actually not far from the Rockport town line. I've got an aerial here that doesn't show a big area, but this is Beauchamp here, and then Seaview Cemetery is right over here.
There is a drawing that showed the neighbors, I think.
That's existing. Yeah. It's on Rockport line, right?
Oh, I might have that right.
Takes care of that one. Good lobster right around this rock right here.
I thought there was one that showed the actual neighboring properties.
At 280.
Oh, I know what it was in. It's the,
Yes, you can see it's close to the Rockport town line.
This is the cemetery.
Yes.
yeah, there was, included in those documents that I sent around to the committee, there was a, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger, an aerial showing the
Thank you.
the cemetery, I believe that's the cemetery beside it, and the former, well, now the Fox Hill, not sure if it's still called Fox Hill,
Yeah,
up
the
on the hill.
Hollies are still there at
Oh, right.
280, right?
Yep. So it shows the neighbors. So did you get that one, Elliot?
Yeah, that's what we've got right here.
Is that what that is? Okay, there you go.
So will the Shermans own two properties there, the one the pier's on and then the adjoining one?
Do they own, they don't own the one to the north, right?
It's an LLC that owns that. I don't have the specific.
No, right now,
Well-
Richard, I think on that aerial photograph, we've got a highlight around what they,
Yeah,
What
and
they
then,
own.
but then the one that's numbered 3 shows George and Betsy Sherman.
oh, so they must own that also then.
Yeah, that's on here.
It's not important.
Right.
I don't think, I just,
College.
That's what we're doing here, no.
yeah.
Right.
See those?
Okay, there's,
Yep.
oh, okay, yeah, that makes it.
Close to attention, this one right here.
In terms of any other, do we have any other general questions for Will before we just dive in? I think we've,
Well, on the gallows, seems I read last night someplace where you can go 8 feet above in this area.
Yep.
Does that give you the ability to not have it removable?
Yeah, it might. You know, I'd have to double check with Proc to see what height they typically build those at. Yeah, I think I've just gotten in such a habit of in Camden making them removable that I might not have double checked, to be honest, but
And it may be different in the outer harbor as opposed to the
it's a
coastal harbor.
Right.
Yeah. I was trying to
Indeed, it probably
find where I
is.
read that last night, but I'm not coming up with it right now. But
And I hadn't picked up on that, Mark, so I can double check.
so I thought that in terms of the procedure for going through this one, as we said, it's very similar to the last pier we did, but with this review memo, I'll call it, along with the criteria, I thought we should just fly through or review the coastal harbor regulations that Jeremy has excerpted from the ordinance, make sure that we're all clear on all of that. Make sure that there are no questions, and I did want to ask, Mark just raised the question about the fender pilings, bollards, et cetera, and it says shall be limited to a height of 6 feet above the walkway, and I just want to make sure that we are clear on that one, that it is 6 feet. Is that correct?
6 feet?
6 feet's what we have on this, so that's what I wanted to, that is something I wanted to clarify.
I think that 8 feet mark might have been the height of the pier above mean high water. I don't think it applies to the height above the pier deck itself.
That's what I think. I'm remembering that from a long time ago, just by reviewing, because this is my first time actually
A coastal harbor?
coastal harbor period.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think the last one we did was probably the Collies.
Yeah, it's pretty clear on this thing that it is 6 feet,
And
on
that's
the
Camden
ordinance.
or Rockport?
That's Camden. I think that was like back in 2003, in the 90s.
It was before 2001.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, getting old.
So we can have fender pilings, bollards, railings, or other accessory structures up to 6 feet above the walkway. Railings will be substantially open. Construction piers, as we've said, can be 150 feet from the harbor line or to a point where the depth of the water does not exceed 6 feet. Height of this is an important one. The height of the pier walkway shall not exceed 10 feet above mean high water. That's in the coastal harbor. And then the overall width of the pier shall not exceed 6 feet, including all rails and supports at the pier walkway. The overall width of the granite or stone supports shall be in conformance to standard engineering practice. Then we get into, and please stop me, anybody who has questions on this. I'm just I think it's important that we're all on the same page before we even start the review.
Oh, yeah, here we are.
Permit approval requirements, no mobile vessel hoists, blah, 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 shall be constructed except upon approval and issuance of a permit in accordance, so you can't build one until you've gotten your permit. And then the procedure for the permit, which we just talked about, evidence of submission of applicable, of application for state and federal permits, evidence of submission of application for applicable Army Corps permits, which seems to be the same as a federal permit, but that's all right. A site plan stamped and sealed by the engineer, registered in the state of Maine, at a scale of not greater than 1 inch to 20 feet, showing length of the property, of the project, harbor line, et cetera. Permit under this shall not be issued by the code enforcement until all of the approvals have been received. So this is the first step, as it were. And we talked about the procedure in terms of the code enforcement officer's role when the application comes in, coming to us, and then to the select board, and ultimately to the planning board. Sorry. Hello.
Hi.
I'll try to turn you up.
Have we talked about the moratorium context, the potential, that we're putting a moratorium on the town water for the election?
We have not discussed it in any depth. Do you want to give us the rundown from last night briefly?
Well, it is going to go on the town warrant, and just mentioning it here, and because the date would be March 15th, moving 180 days, the moratorium would run for 180 days starting on March 15th to give us the time to review the ordinance. And one of the things that we're particularly concerned about is making sure that new constructions, new piers and buildings would accommodate sea level rise, because that's something that right now the ordinance does not account for. So I just want to mention this to the Harbor Committee, and if Jeremy is there, maybe he can give more details about this. But I want to make sure that this information is available to you guys, that potentially that's going to be impacting this process. And to be completely honest, I don't know how it's going to impact the process. I'm sorry, I'm giving you like a half-day information, but I think it's something that we really need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think I'll tackle that one, Sophie, unless Jeremy wants to. But I mean, I think no, I respect that the select board is moving its moratorium forward. That being said, it is a proposal at this point, so I think that it can't impact our review. We sort of have a job to do with regards to this application, recognizing that moratorium may pass and could impact this application, but it also may not. So I think that it's important that we do what we have to do. Yeah.
Correct. I think it's more in the sense of managing expectations and not having this as a surprise, and making sure that all public information is available to all members of the Harbor Committee and prospective and current applicants as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because I was going to bring that up later in the agenda, just in that I suspect that will become an upcoming task for the Harbor Committee. We'll likely be involved in that to jump into that part. All right, thank you, Sophie.
I would just jump in and agree with Josh. I mean, we don't know if that's going to pass, and the applicant is moving forward. This project has been in the works for a few years, to be honest with you. And, I mean, Will knows about the moratorium, and I mentioned it earlier. I mean, they're moving forward as if under the current ordinance, and if things change, if moratorium passes, we'll already be 90 days into that 180 days of working on coming up with some ordinance amendments. So I agree with you, Josh, that likely you ought to probably start looking at the coastal and harbor ordinance, looking at it from that perspective, because again, once June hits, we'll be already 90 days into that 180-day moratorium because it's retroactive to March 15th. So.
If I could make one comment, regardless of whether it passes or not, I think the ordinance could use some update.
I have a question. How will that affect this project if it passes?
If the moratorium passes, this project is, for the most part, it didn't get approved prior to March 15th, no permit from the select board. So it would, unless, the applicants want to, go down the legal route and go that way, it will, for the most part, kill this project, and they'll have to resubmit under proposed ordinance amendments that we'll have to generate over the next, well, not a year. I mean, you've got 180 days to do the moratorium work, and yes, the select board can hold another hearing to extend it out another 180 days, but that has to go to town vote again, too.
Changes in ordinance have to go to a town vote, which
Correct.
Until next June, right? Or will it be
It would,
November?
November, I mean,
Conceivably, it could be November, but
Okay.
that's a, knowing how these things go, that's a short timeline.
Very.
well, yeah, considering November, actually, all the ordinance amendments would need to be done by like mid-August in order to get on the ballot in November. So likely that's what will happen. I mean, you got a lot of work to do, and I think the planning board's got work to do to address it as well.
So to Sophie's point, I think like I said, we have a job to do, which is to review this proposal as it is in front of us. That being said, I think it would be fine for us to discuss as we go through the review criteria. We need to evaluate it on its merits and have our comments on its merits in terms of the ordinance as it's written today. That doesn't mean we can't talk about it and say, okay, this meets the 10 feet above sea level, above high water, et cetera. Where does that actually place us? You know what I mean? Like 10 feet above high water, is that high enough? Is it the right number? We can start that discussion, but I want to be really careful today that we don't.
Yeah, no, I mean,
we
you
don't
need to
spend
stay
yeah.
in the lane of what the review criteria currently is.
Exactly, but I think to Sylvie's point, just knowing that these that for the committee's sake, from an efficiency standpoint, we're going to probably be looking at these things again in not in light of just this one application, but rather this is something that could come up.
I would also add, and I've talked to Will about it, I think he's mentioned it before, and even at the planning board on these piers, when they build these, Proc and the engineers like Gartley and Dorsey, I mean, they're not new to this issue of sea level rise and the issues that piers have to deal with. I've been told, and Will could probably speak to it, I mean, they're building these things with the idea that they can retrofit them in the future should sea level rise to a certain point that it's going to be underwater. I mean, Proc is, very savvy at this, and so are the engineers. So they're planning ahead, but they're staying within our ordinance requirements, and things can be retrofitted once they're constructed, so.
All right. Well, let's just keep on trucking then. I think we've talked about the process and in terms of the select board and the harbor committee. But I think next we should go through the review criteria. But I do want to, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
We don't in this review criteria.
Yeah.
I know that the planning board, goes through and says, have they submitted the site plan stamped and sealed by an engineer, the
Yeah.
length, showing all of this.
Yeah.
Do we need to do that as a matter of record, that they have provided each of these
I think
elements?
you could find that I found that the application was complete. And I think that's good enough. I mean, your review criteria is really, so I find it complete and that it meets the ordinance requirements. I think you can find that. And then your review criteria is really that kind of what the, F.
Right.
F2 is your real review criteria. So I think that's what you should focus on, but I certainly making a motion and that
Yeah.
it's been found to be complete and compliant with the zoning ordinances or the ordinance requirements is fine.
All right, I think that's a good idea. Does everybody grasp that we do, I think as a matter of record, we should, as a committee, find that we have found that we recognize that the code enforcement officer has found the application to be complete, and that they have provided all of the documentation that is required by ordinance, thus that would get it to our approval. Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect? Something similar to that?
I actually had a question about that. It seemed to me that the Army Corps of Engineers and DEP were done for the previous pier, and that this has been slightly updated, so you've reapplied, or has that all come back? And
Yep, we've resubmitted, and the length and the impact of the cribs aren't any different, so the Army Corps basically just said that they're fine, and that we're waiting to get an official response from the DEP. They'll just amend the permit that they've already issued.
Okay.
But I think to that point, because that was a question that I had, I guess from an ordinance standpoint, we have to have evidence of submission of an application for all state and federal and Army Corps permits. It doesn't say that we have to have approval from the state. So, because I would say that at this point, we don't have approval from the Army Corps. We have a conditional or a pending approval from them, is the way I read that.
So in the DEP permit we have is actually for the same length, width, nothing, the only thing that changed is how we did the slope of the pier to meet the height requirements and the stairs. So the permit we have from DEP is still valid.
And is it because there was this email from Peter
That's-
Tischbein?
That's the core.
Yeah, and that's, right, from the Corps. So is he saying that this is actually still valid?
Yes.
Even though it says, despite what it says on the permit?
Yeah, I know.
The way it currently, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting.
You can imagine our frustration with the.
But so, I mean, is this considered approval, this email?
Yes. Yeah, because what we sent this plan to them and said, based on your permit, there is text in there that talks about it expiring October 13th, 2021. Even though this is the exact same dimensions, 5 foot by 135, the granite cribs, everything was the same except for that we did the slope different. And so we sent it to them and just said, hey, for your records, plus can you reissue it because your thing says it's expired. And that's when he sent us this email that said, well, despite what it says, it really isn't.
When we reissued our general permit for the period, we added a section, item 38, page 18. So is that in the general permit?
That's in their,
Statewide programmatic general permit.
It is, okay.
It is.
It's not for this one, it's their
Correct.
general. When they issue a general permit now, it's for 5 years.
Right.
That's the difference.
right.
Okay, so therefore, this is essentially grandfathered under that by saying you approved it, we approved it, and then we changed the rules and said, actually, it's a 5-year permit, not a 2.
Right.
As well, had the permit been issued under the, it would still be
We're having
authorized.
to keep this email on record because
Yeah.
they have issued a lot of permits that say they've expired. They won't reissue them because they say they really haven't expired.
Because they've changed their rules, they changed the guidelines.
General permit is the rules that they operate under.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm psyched to see that they went from 2 to 5. Our ordinance, our zoning ordinance talks about 2 years. You got to finish your construction. And 2 years is just not enough in today's world to get approval and to get builders and to get everything together. So I'm psyched the Army Corps did that. I'm looking to do the same thing in our zoning ordinance to change the 2-year period.
So we are awaiting a motion on finding the application complete to get to us, as it were. Anybody?
I'll make a motion that we find this application complete. And the town planner also finds this application complete.
Excellent. Second, anyone? Tom? Tom seconds that one. Further discussion on that? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Okay, so now we're here. Now we're at the table. So now let's go through the review criteria. Let's talk about the project in specifics, I guess, with regards to the criteria that are outlined that we have to evaluate. So I think we just take them one by one. I would suggest that we proceed where we can go through. We have, I don't know how much this is, 8 items. Let's see how it goes, but I think we could go through them all together and then have a vote at the end, rather than voting on each and every one of them. Let's see how the conversation unfolds, but that is my hope.
So can we just state this is under Article 6?
Article 6, Section 6. Section 6. And it's the procedure for permit.
6 and
6F2, is that where you are? Yeah.
So we have to determine whether or not this project will impact the following items. So the first one, will it or will it not interfere with or pose a hazard to the navigational channels between the inner harbor and the bay from the public vessel ramp to the main channel? Interesting. Thoughts on that first one?
so my thought is that it is not near any channel,
Correct.
so it does not pose a hazard to any channels.
And it is not in any,
Josh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was very hard for me to hear who was talking and what they were saying, so if people could speak up, that would help me follow the conversation along.
sure, that was Mark. It also might be, this might be on the live stream, but I'm a little confused, honestly, by the YouTube, Zoom versus live YouTube, I don't know. But anyway, yes, we will try to speak up, Sophie. So Mark has said that this is not applicable because it is neither in proximity to a navigational channel between the inner harbor and the bay, nor from the public vessel ramp to the main channel. Seems like, can we all agree on that one? We all agree?
Correct.
Okay. Not applicable. It will substantially eliminate or interfere with existing and designated mooring and anchorage areas and access thereto. I don't believe there's any designated mooring areas in this area, certainly not designated. Anchorage areas, I don't think, I mean, you can anchor in there by the Baltic Galleries there, but it's not much of an anchorage.
This is the coastal harbor, too. It's not like, this seems to be written for the inner harbor or
It is odd that the ordinance,
Outer.
outer harbor.
and-
outer and coastal in the same category. I mean, I think that's maybe something you ought to look at in the future is bifurcating those two.
That's a good idea.
When it says with existing and designated mooring and anchorage areas and access thereto. I don't believe that there are any
So-
designated mooring or anchorage areas out
Well, I
there.
would make a motion that this is not in a designated mooring or anchorage area.
I would agree. Catch that, Sophie?
Have we seen cruise ships
It is.
anchored
Yeah.
in that
It's only 6 feet of water.
neighborhood?
They'd be aground.
It'd still be there.
The depth at low water at the end of the fixed structure is about 4 feet. And at the end of the float, it's probably close to 6.
Yeah, it's fairly shallow in there. Okay, so I would agree. Anybody?
There are a couple moorings there, no?
No.
Or am I confusing like the couple moorings that are in between Curtis Highland and?
Yeah. I think you're thinking about
It's
the.
further south?
It's much further south. Yeah, it's kind of around the corner. This is it's really right on the property line or town line between Camden and Rockport. It's over by the cows, by the Belty Galloways there. Okay, so I think we can all agree that one is not applicable.
Well, we're looking for a second.
I don't think we need to do a motion on each one. I think we can just sort of agree, and then we'll, at the end. Unless you think we need to do individual
I
votes?
mean, either way, I think it's probably clearer to just do one for each one and move on and not have to do it at the end.
Okay, we can do that, especially in case there's a debate. Let's go back to the first one then.
I think you had a motion and a second on the first one, didn't you?
We just had people mention
Just had
it.
people talk about it, so, but Mark, do you want to just restate sorry,
Let's see.
I could summarize for you if you want. The item A, that the first, that the project is not applicable to review criteria A because it is not in proximity to the navigational channels between the inner harbor and the bay or from the public vessel ramp to the main channel. That was why it was not applicable.
Yeah, I might eliminate the not applicable and just say it does not pose a hazard to navigation channels.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's a motion that the project will not interfere with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, you've got all that wording.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
3 or 4, but they're mixed up a bit, but yeah, I get it.
All right, so we have a motion from Mark on that one. Do we have a second on that?
Sure.
Bruce does a second. Further discussion. All those in favor? 3, 4, 5, 5-0. Second was that it will not substantially eliminate or interfere with any existing or designated mooring or anchorage areas or access thereto. So I think we'll strike the not applicable.
So the motion is that it will not substantially eliminate or interfere with existing and designated mooring or anchorage areas.
Correct.
Second on that one? Bruce? Further discussion? All those in favor? Tom? All right, good. 5-0. All right, next one. Will the project substantially reduce or interfere with existing shellfishing and clamming areas and access thereto? So, for this one, I did have a few questions, and I was going to go to the Army Corps permit because they seem to have done a review, and did they determine, I just want to confirm with this, that they determined there is no clamming or commercial use over there. Is that correct? Fishing, shellfishing and clamming areas? Did I find that?
That's in DEP, isn't it? Not the Corps.
Yes, sorry, Tom, you're exactly right. It is in DEP. That's what I was-
Does say substantially reduce, and the size of those cribs are pretty small. That's the only interference, I would think, just the size of the cribs and the 2 moorings.
Well, my thought was that there is no existing shellfishing or clamming areas in that area. That's what I'm,
Yeah, they're pretty clear on page 2 of 7 in there. Item 4, page 2, habitat considerations.
there we go.
And can't get a lot clearer than that.
There was no mapped or essential or significant wildlife habitats located in the area.
Okay, so the motion would be, as per DEP's letter, let me rephrase this. As per DEP's determination, the department finds that the activity will not unreasonably harm any significant wildlife habitat, freshwater wetland plant habitat, threatened or endangered plant habitat, aquatic or adjacent upland habitat, travel corridor, freshwater, estuaries or marine fisheries, and other aquatic life. Did you get all that?
How about if I say, as per DEP, and just restate C, but say does not substantially reduce?
That's sufficient.
Works for me.
I'll do that for
But we'll cite the DEP letter, because that is kind of what we're basing it on. And I think that is an important one.
Yeah.
Do I have a second on that motion? Tom? Any further discussion on that one? All right, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you.
Who motioned and seconded?
Mark motioned and Tom seconded.
Okay, thanks.
Item D, will the project interfere with public vessel launching and pier facilities? I don't see any public vessel launching or pier facilities in this area. Did anybody else? No public.
Make a motion that it does not interfere with public vessel launching and pier facilities.
And you got a second.
Tom seconds that one. Thank you. Further discussion on that one? All those in favor? 5-0. Making good progress. All right, item E, substantially block or interfere with public rights of passage and uses of the shores and flats. Public rights of passage and uses of the shores and flats. I believe that this would probably refer to the public's right to the intertidal zone.
I would say I think it's important to remember words that, there are words in this sentence too, like substantially. When the planning board reviewed the last pier, I think one of them didn't really, it's my opinion, didn't really look at substantially. Substantially means something, and I think that's important for you guys to remember. It doesn't say, shall it, where are we? Block or interfere with public rights. It says substantially block or interfere.
Got to paddle around it.
Right.
Or under.
Or under.
Well, so on this one, I did have a question on the cross section for this. Yeah.
Down here?
Yeah, that's one. If you were in the intertidal zone, where you're publicly allowed to walk, and
If you're fishing, fouling, or
if you're
navigating.
fishing, fouling, or navigating, exactly.
I
And you come upon this currently, this is, trying to get my bearing here, this is the highest tide, so this is the intertidal zone.
Yep, all the way from here to here.
And so you would still, at low tide, be able to walk underneath this pier
Yes.
and at low tide, so you're, not at high tide.
That's definitely one of the advantages of the coastal harbor and the fact that we can have this be higher than we can in the inner or outer harbor. So there's actually going to be 8 feet clear underneath, between these two cribs, so you could easily walk under it.
You could easily walk under there.
And then as you go out, it gets a little less, but still,
Right.
you'll have 6 feet out here, and the grade drops away. So you have plenty of,
Well, and again, I'm only talking about on dry land, meaning you're walking.
well, I know, but this is low tide out here. right? So
Okay.
this entire area is in a tidal.
Right.
But as you go out, the grade drops away, so you can see.
You're going to have even more. That's what I
even
meant.
more
You're going to have
space.
more space out there. This is the pinch point would be in here.
Exactly.
Okay.
But even at the pinch point, at the high water line, you can walk under it. 2
And,
feet makes a big difference.
okay, and public rights of passage and uses of the shores and flats.
I mean, there's no flats here, it's all ledge and boulder.
Let's say barnacles. What is the clearance here, if it is high tide, between the high water and the bottom of the deck? Do we have
So
that?
it's actually here, this dimension would be the case. So minus the depth of the stringers in excess of 8 feet, because
That's mean high water.
there's mean high water there. This.
Oh, that's mean high water.
This dotted line, that's highest annual tide, so that's
Oh.
mean high water.
Oh, okay. So, and what did you say this dimension was? 8 feet?
Well,
Less
depth
the
of
stringer?
The stringer, so 10 feet minus the depth of the stringer, something in excess of 8 feet.
Okay. Okay.
So, again, the coastal harbor makes a big difference. You
Yeah.
can either walk or kayak under this at all
At all tides.
tides.
It sure does make a difference.
Make a motion. This project does not substantially block or interfere with public rights of passage and the use of the shores and flats.
Is that one? Further discussion on that item? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Adversely, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Adversely affect small recreational boating activities to a substantial degree, which is perhaps different than substantially. We just changed it there. Adversely affect small recreational boating activities to a substantial degree. I guess, I mean,
Talked about it.
we talked about that, small recreational boating activities. So, you have to look at what a small recreational boating activity would be in this area. There's not much.
You would if you could. Well, you're constrained by drafts, so it's going to be a small boat.
It's going to be a small boat in there. Yeah.
It's kayaking.
Adversely affect small.
Yeah, I did.
And I think substantial is the key word in there also, you know, it's,
That's an easy
so
one.
I'd like to make a
As
motion.
well as adversely.
I'd like to make a motion, this project does not adversely affect small recreational boating activities to a substantial degree.
Second.
Tom seconds that one. Further discussion?
Mr. Pixley, is that area, for example, is that used by the yacht club classes?
No, they don't go that south. And if they did, they're not going to be that far in to the shore, you know? But good question.
Further discussion on that one? All those in favor? 5-0. All right, construction of approved projects shall commence within 1 year from the date of approval by the Select Board and shall be completed within 2 years from the date of issuance of the building permit. How,
We can't vote on it.
how could that be part of our review criteria?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Well, I think, yeah, our review is that the applicant states that they intend to do this within that time period.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean-
Mr. Chairperson, I don't think, but Jeremy, you can comment on it.
I think G, H, and I should actually be in the procedure section and not really in this section. That's my opinion on
I
that.
agree.
Well, because we don't have,
I don't think you looked at these last three, the last time you did the Rixon Pier on Harbor Road. I don't believe you did those last three.
I don't have an eye. Do you have an eye?
No, I have an I. I didn't include the I because I think that one was completely not relevant to you.
All right.
So sorry about that.
Well, then,
It talks about regular maintenance and emergency repairs.
So I'd like to make a motion, G, H, and I, are not applicable to this application.
Or our consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, not applicable
review criteria.
for our approval criteria.
Yeah, for Harbor, yeah.
Right.
And it goes to show you, because in 2004, we redid this. We had a big, all through the winter, we went through the whole ordinance. But since we haven't had an actual, application for a coastal harbor pier, it's just kind of that kind of fell through. That's obvious, it should get changed.
All right, so just so we're clear on this one, because it's a threefer, these three, Mark has motioned that these three items, G, H, and I, are not applicable to the Harbor Committee's review of this application. Okay.
Yep.
Wait, do we get a second on that one? Is that one? Further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. I believe that will conclude that concludes our review criteria. Bruce and I will,
I think procedure would say that we make a final motion that we approve this project based on,
Submitted criteria,
yeah, we approve this project based on,
the review criteria, the votes of the review criteria.
Contained in 6F2.
we approve this project based on the, I'm stumbling on these words, based on the harbor ordinance approval criteria.
I think that suffices.
Second on that motion? Tom, thank you. Further discussion on the overall motion there? See none? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment maybe to Gartley and Dorsey, since they're here, and since we are looking at, and we need to start looking at harbor ordinance and the zoning ordinance when it comes to these piers and sea level rise. I don't know if you folks could give us some thoughts moving forward on what elevations things should maybe be at, or just give us some comments on it. I mean, we're going to have to dive into this at some point. Might as well start getting some information now.
Yeah, and I think, that's why I was asking a lot of the questions about passing underneath, because as the ocean, that gap is going to get smaller and smaller. And so sort of how we change our ordinances to preserve, I think we're all in the same boat that we want to preserve that access under there and along there. So how we do that, whether it's raising the pier or, changing the system of construction, I don't want to get into, that system.
I was going to say, the two things on this pier that made a difference compared to the Rixon Pier was, one, clearly the coastal harbor has some better flexibility in what we can do. And then we used steel beams, which were shallower than the glue laminated beams, so that helped with that overall depth underneath the pier.
The other,
One thing, if you're correcting one problem with the pier by raising it, you create another problem by the ramp and the length that it has to be. So,
and the visual impact that,
it's
at
got
low
to be
tide.
balanced out.
Right.
Because I think that's the thing, is people are going to then say, well, wait a minute, now we've made these things 16 feet above the high water, and so at low tide, this thing is going to look like it's screaming in the sky, you know what I mean?
And
So
they need to be another 25 feet longer.
Right. So what's more
So-
important, raising the pier or keeping the?
Right.
I think there's definitely a balancing act there.
Yeah.
And the coastal harbor, if the outer harbor was the same as the coastal harbor, it would make a huge difference. I mean, this extra 2 feet
made a big difference.
it makes a big difference. But you're right, the ramp, I'm not sure where this total 50 feet from end of fixed pier to float came from. My guess is it's somewhat arbitrary. And I do think it would be reasonable to consider a little bit longer ramp, because, a lot of the people that use these are older, and at low
I see,
tide,
as you get
at low
higher,
tide,
now I
it's
see
really
the,
steep.
Yeah, right, you're making it steeper and steeper, aren't you? If you raise the thing, you'd have to change
Yeah,
that.
but low tide's gonna get higher too.
Right, yeah, so.
Well, maybe. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they should go together, but
Yeah.
still, even now, if it's 2 feet higher at low tide, a 30-foot or 40-foot gangway is pretty steep.
It's substantial.
It's pretty steep. I mean, ADA requires 80. So there needs to be a balance there.
And this project was built on the concrete cribbing, I guess you'd call it. Was the previous project, the one in the Outer Harbor? That was
The Outer Harbor, that was granted also.
That was granted also? Okay. Because that seems to be another thing, to preserve, the fewest number of uprights, for lack of a better term, holding the pier allows the most access underneath it.
And also granite cribbing is more traditional and in the, kind of like meets the harbor, makes Camden look like a traditional harbor.
Yeah, and it's certainly long-term, a lot less maintenance. I mean, the reason people do it is because they never have to touch it again. So when you can afford to, it's nice not to have to replace piles or.
Well,
And the other thing about this, I mean, you can just pick that pier with a crane and slide another piece
go
of
up.
granite
We can
under
go
it,
up as things
right?
change,
So,
right?
Well,
I
that's
mean, that's where I said there needs to be a balance. If we went too high now and the sea hasn't actually risen,
You're going to have this.
then your gangways are gonna need to be longer and steeper, plus it's gonna
Right.
look like it's way up in the air. So
Right.
I think we wanna be careful forcing it to be
so,
too high.
a possibility there to look at is not change the requirements, but have the requirements meet the ability to be changed? Meaning that, you're building it, and yes, we
I think
can
the outer
just,
harbor should be changed, because right now,
Go higher?
it's too low, and it does create a problem at different tide levels. You can't potentially get under it, depending on what the shoreline is like. So like on this one of the reasons we sloped it was that as you got closer to shore, you could still get under it if people wanted to walk under it. At the end, though, we got back down to a little more reasonable height so that the gangway wasn't so steep. Right, so this allowed us to balance those two issues.
Right.
And that's why we did it that way. And some of that's because we didn't have much flexibility with the ordinance.
Right, you're kind of constrained.
Right.
All right, Elliot?
I didn't notice how the float is anchored.
It's anchored with chains back to the last granite crib and mooring blocks on the outer part.
How far are those blocks out?
I think they're usually like maybe 40, 50 feet beyond the pier, and then the chains come to the inside corners of the float. They cross under.
We didn't talk about floats, because the floats are purview of the harbor master, not the harbor committee, but a good question. I think the last time we did talk about it, and I think I mentioned that it's really, the floats are specific to the harbor master, not to harbor committee or even the select board, to be honest with you.
Well, and there it's about managing his resource, his mooring resource, and we've determined that there is no mooring resource to be managed in this area because there are no moorings out there.
Do pier moorings have the same inspection as boat moorings?
That's something we actually looked at it about 10 years ago, because that was not a criteria in the ordinance, and we should put that in. I know all the inspectors of the floats, so I make sure that they do, and they do check them. But that's a good question, because that came up about 10 years ago, where I was like, wait a minute, and I made sure that the inspectors all realize that they do. Verbally, I've said it does have the same criteria, and they said, yeah, we kind of figured that. So they're kind of,
Okay.
even though it's not in the ordinance, but we should, in the next couple of months, we should talk about some things like that should get put in, so it's more concrete.
Well, there's no time like the present. If we got this
Yeah,
moratorium, if
exactly.
this plays out, I mean, we need to start coming up with changes and kill as many, birds with one stone as we can, so.
All right, well, that's, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, guys. Jeremy, hold on, Jeremy, one to you. I did want to touch on Agenda item 4, which is the Windjammer license transfer review. We don't have all the documentation that we need for that, but I wanted you guys to know that that is coming. So apparently one of the Windjammers is being sold. I'm a little unclear, and this is why I asked you to stay. I'm a little unclear as to what the Harbor Committee's role is, because generally these businesses don't transfer very often. So, but I believe that there will be a role for us to play in the very short term.
Can I speak to this?
Sure.
So I'd like to introduce you, Captain Rebecca White.
Wow.
She just bought the oldest schooner, Lose Our French, from Wells. Basically what they've come in, they've done everything with Liz and I, and verbally we've talked with Audra. And in the ordinance, there's a lot of gray area on how this works. So basically on December 30th of every year, the Windjammers, and like you just commented, it's so rare that these old vessels turn over that we don't have a way to, it's not written exactly on how this happens. So at this time frame, well, right now, where it's now transferred to Captain Rebecca, or Becky as I know her, basically what we're asking, what Audra would like it is if, and I'm asking for you guys to do this, if you feel comfortable, is that someone makes a motion that just says they advise the select board to dissolve the current agreement that they have with the Wells, and now that we've actually have the signed passenger vessel license agreement from the new owners, that they let that ride this summer until, because right now they're at the end of their 3-year contract with the town.
The Frenches.
The Frenches. All the Windjammers are together with that.
Yep.
So would make it very smooth for Becky, is that you guys just make a motion to the select board that they dissolve the current contract with the Wells and let Becky ride this out till December until they redo it for another 3 years. And they can look at it, they look at if anything's changed and stuff like that. But everything's, they have the exact same agreement, they've transferred ownership. That's what I would like, just to make it, I just said it would be just good if you guys both, we introduced the new owners to you guys, the committee, and you guys kind of started the process.
Okay. I don't feel that we can dissolve the agreement without,
You can advise to the harbor committee, you can advise to the select board that they do that. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I just said we should do.
I mean, what I might suggest is that we make a motion to allow them to operate under the old agreement.
Currently, that's what you did, basically. it's the
Right,
same thing.
under the current.
Yeah.
I mean, we
It's
don't
the
want
same
to
thing.
dissolve, because we do want an agreement.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that back when we went to the 3-year, that it would transfer or something like that, as opposed
Well,
to
no,
dissolving, but it would end at the same time
Yeah, exactly.
as the other ones.
Yeah,
so I guess here's what I'm gonna kick this can a little bit down the road. Whoop, you say something, Sophie?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the harbor committee can allow this.
No, they can't.
No, we're-
I think it's in the purview of the select board
It totally is.
to
Right.
allow anything.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm going to say is we're not going to make a motion today about this. We welcome
Recommendation.
Captain Becky to the fleet, absolutely. It's a beautiful vessel, and we're excited to have some new blood and new operators as well, though Garth has been a great asset to the harbor. But I don't believe that it is the harbor committee's role to transfer these licenses. So I'm going to leave that to the select board. And if they need the harbor committee to review any documents, et cetera, we're happy to do that. And obviously, this will all be coming back up again towards the end of the year. So that's when we could have a full review, unless the select board asks us to do that sooner, which they might, and that's up to them. But I don't think we want to.
I think we can still make a recommendation to the select board.
Yes, you can make a recommendation, but I don't think you can allow them to operate under an agreement.
Precisely, yeah.
Precisely. The purview of the harbor committee.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I guess so our recommendation would be that we don't have any objection to the select board moving forward with a transfer to a new operator. We don't know anything about, the new operators, and we haven't gone through all their criteria, licensing. There's all that stuff that's in the agreement, licensing and insurance and all that stuff. And I would assume that's part of the select board review, to make sure that they have all of that. I don't think we have.
But that's the point. I mean, if we make a recommendation to allow them to operate under the current agreement.
Okay, provided that they meet all of those requirements.
Then they
There
would
we
have
go.
to meet all those
Yes,
requirements.
right.
Doesn't the current agreement cease to exist when one party ceases to exist?
That's the part that's unclear.
That's the
Well,
great.
that's-
I mean,
Yes, it does.
That's why we have a town attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the Louis R. French Corporation. Well, they no longer exist as an applicant because they no longer own the vessel.
Well, the Louis R. French Corp., the corporation still is in existence and still operates the vessel.
So you
It's
purchase
just
the
name, yes.
the corporation.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's, the corporation exists in perpetuity because of the sale.
Yep.
Therefore, the agreement's still in effect.
Right, because you're buying.
And that's what, but you guys are right. Basically, we're just looking for a recommendation. I mean, obviously, you guys are an advisory group, you can't make it, but a recommendation that you understand what's going on, and your recommendation would just be kind of perfunctory, but
Yep. Do we have a motion to that effect?
Can you word it for me?
I think it is fair for the Harbor Committee to make a motion that we recommend that the Select Board allow the new operators of the Louis R. French and its corporation to operate for the remainder of this year, provided that they meet and prove to the town the same requirements that the previous ownership had to meet. We basically want to make sure that they are operating on the same, playing by the same rules as the previous owners.
Under terms and conditions of the previous.
Terms and conditions and demonstration of that. That's why we haven't seen any of that documentation, so we are not in a position to review formally their transfer, but we certainly would
Well,
recommend.
You sent us the agreement.
Right, but there's all the documentation that goes along with it. There is.
they've shown Liz's. And that would be present when the select board looks at it.
Which, I mean, we
Exactly.
don't review that
Recommendation,
anyways.
yeah.
Yeah,
We-
and it says
we do
terms and
actually.
conditions, and that covers all that.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Motion made by Mark,
Second.
seconded by Elliot. Thank you, Elliot. Further discussion? All those in favor? Welcome to the harbor.
Becky, congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, so,
I'll wave to you when you go by.
all right.
I'll see you on the bay. I'll stop by for some chowder.
You got it. Is that all that I?
That's it, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you.
Back to fitting out. All right, thank you. All right, lastly, we do have a memorial bench application in our packet that came in, and I wanted to talk about it just briefly. I understand from Liz that Steve was envisioning this one going at Steamboat Landing. And I wanted to kind of ask him a little bit about that. First of all, I know we have one bench at Steamboat Landing
We have one bench
currently.
currently, and we have room for another.
We do?
We have definitely another room at Steamboat Landing for another bench. Because we have that gravel area that I made
Yeah.
2 years ago for this bench. And I'm amazed how, by that little bit of work that I did, there's so much more, it's more inviting, so more people are kind of showing up there, walking their dogs, more sitting on the bench. I would love to, I'm curious to know what's going to happen to that area. I know there was a proposal by London Morris to do that big project, and I'm not sure where that is now, but I think that we should talk about, in the next 5 years, of how we're going to improve that area.
Well, and I think that's kind of where I was with this particular application. We did just submit, just yesterday, recommendations to the select board, which includes improving this area even in the short term. So I'm leery, though there is space for a bench. I'm a little bit leery of putting one in currently, like today, approving it today, because there are some recommendations in there about benches, but also about access down to the water. So what I would propose is that we hold off on this application for a month and take it up at our next meeting. So that will give the select board time to review the recommendations and give us some time to move forward.
Well, it's my recollection that in past reviews, it was important, their connection to the harbor. And I don't know what.
Well, I don't really want to go into the details of this one yet. I think we'll wait for the next one. This is just sort of, regardless of who it may be, the applicant, I don't want to go there until we have given the select board at least a chance to read through that document and sort of consider those things, maybe get back to us with thoughts. And there's no pressing. I know it would be nice to have this bench always, but I think a month. So let's just hold off on that one for a month. And I suspect we're going to be back here quite a lot over the next little while. So, Elliot.
I thought I heard you say we submitted recommendations. Oh, you're referring to the document.
The document, yeah, the Steamboat Landing analysis and recommendations, I believe we called it. So we're going to hold on that one. Upcoming reviews and tasks. So item 6, last one on the agenda. We touched on it today, but there is this, the select board's moratorium that they're putting forward for the June ballot. So I do want everybody to please follow that one as it goes. They had a hearing on it last night. There was one person who spoke in favor of it, but that was all in the public. So that was the public hearing portion of that. So it behooves us to just kind of keep an eye on that. I think that it will be wise for us to be putting piers, docks, and floats in the outer and coastal harbor on our radar very, very quickly, because I think, as Jeremy pointed out, this moratorium, if it happens, is for 6 months, retroactive by the time it votes for 3. So if we wait, we're going to only have 3 months to do any kind of review. So I don't have this on an agenda yet or anything like that, but I just want you guys to know that we're going to be.
So, what might be interesting is if we had, if we studied where piers could actually be built at this point under the current ordinance. I think Sherman's Cove is saturated.
Well,
based on the shorefront requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So this is where it's going to get interesting, and in a way, we're lucky. We finished the Steamboat Landing thing, and next on our agenda, if you will, our task list was Sherman's Cove, was to look at protections in place for Sherman's Cove for specifically floats, and then I think by proxy, piers and docks as well. So all the protections because there are specific protections in place for Sherman's Cove. I think I'm going to suggest that we broaden that to look at Sherman's Cove, but also look at the outer and coastal harbor as well. We're kind of, our hand is being put to us. So.
Inner harbor,
That's not on the docket.
Any need to look at that?
No.
Because you can't build anything there.
I don't think you can build
The
anything.
harbor is pretty much.
I think you're pretty much done. Yeah, we're pretty much.
I think what I would like is, if I may interject, Josh, sorry.
Yep.
If the moratorium happens, in fact, the timeline is pretty quick. If we can do a lot of work for the harbor committee, like planning, preparing, and outlining the process also, that would be interesting, I think, to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should have it in
Yeah, a workshop.
the
Yeah.
workshop. That would be really interesting. Because I know even though there was only one person who spoke about the moratorium last night, I do think there's a lot of interest to find a way to get some input from the public and other users of the harbor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else? Those are the main upcoming tasks that I think we're going to be tasked with looking at. So next meeting would be very beginning of May, right? Should we set that one before we go too far here? We have been doing Wednesdays. I believe we were doing, Sophie, did you guys redo your schedule? We were trying to do the second Wednesday so that we were right after your select board meeting, but it seems like you've been moving them around, yes?
We had to move them around for a couple of reasons, but we are keeping the ones in May as scheduled because I couldn't move I have like 2.5 days of board meeting on May 2, 3, 4 in Boston, so I couldn't do both board meetings during the day and at night. Just could not.
So should we,
Still going to be on the 9th of May.
the 9th? Oh, okay.
The 10th. Or
The 10th, the 10th is a Tuesday, yeah.
The 10th, sorry.
Yeah. So then should we stick to May 11th as our next board meeting, committee meeting? Does that work for everybody?
Well, I mean, we moved to Wednesdays because Bob's hockey, which is probably over.
When was his hockey? I don't remember. When was his
Well,
hockey?
he played hockey on Tuesday nights, so he wanted to, or I'm sorry, he played hockey on Monday nights or something, so he couldn't make it on Tuesdays. So I'm just suggesting we move back to Tuesdays.
I really can't do Tuesdays.
Oh, you can't?
Tuesdays are, no.
Okay.
After my Tuesday yesterday, no, I can't do Tuesdays. One more meeting would have killed me. So, no, I think. Wednesday, the 11th at
Wednesday, the
0800?
11th, I'm not, yeah, I can make that, yeah.
Sorry, Josh, about this.
No problem.
Today, I just.
No problem. All right, so next one will be the 11th, 0800. I'm going to deviate from the agenda briefly and ask Mr. Pixley if he has anything to report since our last meeting from the harbor that we should know about. You don't have to do a formal report, but just.
No, there's as far as reservations, I would say they're about, in the 20 years I've been here, at this point, they're the strongest they've ever been for overnight dockage. We also have a lot of stuff going on. We've got the New York Yacht Club come in. We've got the big race,
The Camden Classics.
Camden Classics.
When's the yacht club coming in?
That's August 6th, August 5th.
What's that about? New York Yacht?
Yeah, New York Yacht Club. As far as moorings that are being overturned, I've got 14 moorings that people have signed release forms, and I'm re-signing them to the next people on the waiting list. That's going well. 2 inner harbor floats. One thing that I do want to mention is that Ben Magro has had an inner harbor float. It's probably the nicest one. It's very protected. It's the closest one to the north. It's the one that's you make the turn around at the very north turning basin. So it's the most. There's those 3 separate ones that are a little further up that are by themselves. Unfortunately for him, it was the one that the Windjammer is. If they're going to hit a boat, they hit that one. His boat, the Sea Moon, has been hit at least 4 times that I know of. He came to me last year and said he's getting a little older and he doesn't like to row out to it, and he wanted to know if he could make a lateral move and give up. That's for up to a 42-foot boat. He's going to get a smaller boat. Would the town offer him a finger float when it came available, and he'll give up the inner harbor float back to the pool. So it was basically like a lateral change, almost like a mooring move. I made an executive decision that I thought that was fair, and I'm allowing that to happen. So that's now available. So that's 2 spots that are available, and I believe there are 2 finger floats that came available as well. So it's about normal for turnover.
Mooring, 2, you said 14.
Yeah,
Is
14
that
moorings, both
normal?
all different sizes. There are a lot of requests. There's 3 requests for bigger boats. So some of them are only like a 8-foot difference, and I have to move them, and then they give up their mooring spot. And I only do that if they've had that mooring for more than 6-7 years. If they've just got it, I don't let them upgrade, because that's kind of cheating the system. it's so much quicker to get a mooring for a 20-foot boat. You get it for 1 year and say, oh, I want to, just so you know, we're buying a 50-foot boat now. It's like, well, too bad. And I tell them that in the beginning. But 556, the Tisdale mooring, they have a 65-foot boat. They want to go to a 90-foot boat. And I say, well, good for you for being able to do that. But I said, you can't do that where you are. I'm going to talk with them in the next 2 days if they want to go out to Dillingham Cove, which is what I'm calling the new area where those moorings are.
The gut?
Up there. I said, if you want to go out, we can talk about you getting a mooring out there. You give up your more desirable mooring, which was the 60-footer, and you can put a 90-footer out there. So basically, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to go pick up the pump-out boat. It was wintered over at Bristol at D&M Marine. I'm going to go pick that up today. Putting a whaler in today as well. And so, yeah, we're starting to get going.
Starting kicking. Excellent. Cool. If nothing else, I think we determined we don't need a motion to adjourn. Thank you, guys. This was a good meeting. I think we got through that peer application well, and thank you all for your motions, et cetera. And we'll see you on the 11th of May. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your help. Let's talk about it. Remember to eat your dark green vegetables, guys. Don't forget about that. It's a hectic lifestyle we have.
The dark green ones are the yellow ones that have been in the fridge.
Fresh spinach is good.